We ended module 1 with a warning. Plausible doesn't mean accurate. Now, let's dig into why. To use AI tools well, you need to understand what they actually are, and just as importantly, what they are not. At their core, large language models do one thing: they predict the next word in sequence. That's it. You give it a prompt, it generates a response by predicting word for word what's most likely to come next based on patterns it learned from its training. That's not thinking. That's not reasoning, even if they call it that these days. It's mostly statistical prediction at a massive scale. But before we dive into the tools you actually use for this course, let's define some terms. These words get thrown around consistently, often interchangeably. They are not the same thing. The first is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is the broadest category. It's a general phrase for technologies that enable computers to perform advanced functions: seeing, understanding language, analyzing data, making recommendations. AI has been around for decades. Then you have machine learning. It's a type of AI, and it refers to applications that use data to train a model to perform tasks independently and learning from that experience. Your email spam filter is machine learning. So, the algorithm that recommends your videos on YouTube is similar. That's machine learning. But generative AI is newer. It refers to a type of AI that not just finds patterns, but creates new content: text, images, video, sound. That's what ChatGPT, Claude, or similar tools do. They don't just analyze or sort, they generate. For this course, when we talk about AI tools for journalism, we're mostly talking about generative AI. But Gen AI didn't just appear out of nowhere. Three developments made it possible: algorithmic breakthroughs, data, and computation. First, algorithmic breakthroughs, specifically neural networks and something called transformers. Transformers allow AI to understand language in context, not just word by word, but how words relate to each other across sentences and paragraphs. The second is data, massive amount of it. The third is computation, graphics processing units, or what we know as GPUs, huge computing clusters and data centers that actually make it possible for companies to train these models at unprecedented scales. These three factors created what researchers call the scaling laws, an exponential relationship between the model intelligence and the amount of data and computing power you throw at it. As modules got bigger, new capabilities started to emerge that weren't anticipated, things the researchers have typically called emergence. So, LLMs don't actually know anything the way you and I know things. They are just probability machines. They've been trained on enormous amounts of data, billions of pages from the internet, books, articles, code. During their training, what they call pre training, they learned patterns: which words tend to follow which other words, how sentences are structured, what kinds of responses typically follow what kinds of questions. But there's no understanding of the text behind it, no database of verified facts they are pulling from, just patterns. A quick note on some jargon: you sometimes hear the word token. Tokens are a chunk of text, usually a part of a word or just a word. When people say an LLM has a context window of, say, 100,000 tokens, that's roughly how much text it can process at once. Think of it as the AI's short term memory for a single conversation. Take, for example, these tokens: the cat sat on the dash. LLMs use advanced calculus and statistics to figure out the most likely word that should come next. It predicts the next word, mat, because that had around 75% probability. So this is all fine and good. But what does it actually mean in practice? There are 6 limitations every journalist needs to know about LLMs. Let's go through each one quickly. The first is hallucinations. LLMs make things up. They invent facts, fabricate quotes, cite sources that don't exist, and they do it with a lot of confidence. This isn't a bug they are fixing, it's baked into how they work because they are predicting what sounds right, not what is right. They will generate what sounds plausible, but it's just nonsense. Here's a real world example. In 2023, a lawyer in New York used ChatGPT to research a legal brief. The AI provided 6 case citations to support his argument. The problem? All 6 cases were completely fabricated. The courts didn't exist, the judges didn't exist, the rulings didn't exist. When the lawyer asked ChatGPT to confirm that these cases were real, it assured him that they could be found in LexisNexis, which is like a database for law cases. The lawyers were fined eventually and sanctioned. Granted, today's LLMs are much better at catching this egregious level of hallucinations, but it still happens much more than you think. Now, here is a nuance worth understanding. Hallucination isn't always a bad thing. In creative work, this same tendency can actually be useful. When you are brainstorming, trying to break into new territory, looking for unexpected angles or fresh ideas, the AI's willingness to generate things that don't exist yet can be a feature, not a bug. It can help you think sideways. But here's the real tension for journalists. You're trained to expect certainty. You need facts you can verify, quotes you can attribute, sources you can check. That's the foundation of the work. So, when you're using AI, you have to know which mode you're in. Creative exploration, hallucination might help. Factual research, it's a minefield. The tool doesn't know the difference, you do. The second thing you need to know is they have no real time knowledge. LLMs are trained on data up to a certain date, their knowledge cutoff. They don't know what happened yesterday. They don't know who won last week's election. They can't tell you today's stock price. Some tools now, though, include web search to work around this. But the base model itself is frozen in time. And if you ask it about recent events without that search capability, it would either say something that doesn't exist or worse, confidently guess wrong. Third, no memory between sessions. Every time you start a new conversation, the AI starts from zero. It doesn't remember what you talked about last week. It doesn't remember your beats, your preferences. Within a conversation, it can reference earlier messages. That's the context window I mentioned. But once you close that chat, it's gone. Some platforms are now adding memory features, but they're still limited. The default is still fresh start every time. The fourth is no actual understanding. We've mentioned this earlier. This is subtle, but it's important. LLMs can produce text that sounds like it understands the nuance, context, irony, implications behind an issue, but it's just a pattern matching machine, not comprehension. It knows what words would typically appear near that word. It doesn't understand the question. It recognizes patterns that look like your question and generates patterns that look like your answers. This matters because the AI can confidently produce responses that miss the point entirely. You'll be stunned because it never really grasped the point to begin with. Fifth is bias. LLM learn from their training data. If that data contains biases, the LLM would inherit it because all of these materials are drawn from the internet and published text. Those biases show up in the output. And sometimes they can be quite subtle. Certain perspectives get amplified, certain voices get marginalized, certain assumptions get even baked as default. For journalists, this is critical. If you are using AI to help with research or drafting, you need to be aware that the output might reflect biases you didn't intend or wouldn't endorse. And finally, no verification. LLMs can generate tests. The newer ones can attempt some form of fact checking, but that's all they do. They don't fact check themselves. They don't cross reference sources. They don't flag when they are uncertain. You might ask it a factual question and get a confident, well written answer that is completely wrong. So, what does this all mean for you? Everything an LLM gives you must be verified. Every fact, every quote, every citation, every claim. Not because the tool is useless, it's not, but because the tool doesn't know when it's wrong. That's your job. And as a journalist, you already know how to do it. The difference now is you need to apply that skepticism to your AI assistant, not just your sources.